Welcome to part 2 of the fundamentals of post-production for issue 18. Hello again, F11 members. And in part 1 we were looking at the moonrise over the Jurassic coast and using layers to selectively adjust various areas of the image. Now I'm going to show you how to do that just in Lightroom, so that if you don't have Photoshop or you prefer just to work in Lightroom, there are ways and means of doing that. Now let's take as an example this picture that I shot here in the French Alps recently, about 6 weeks ago. This is the Aiguille du Midi above Chamonix. Mont Blanc is just off to the right, and after several days of rain, one morning I found myself looking across the valley at dawn with cloud clinging to the peak of the Aiguille. Quite moody and ethereal. There's a cable car here, by the way, amazing feat of engineering, and if you're ever in the area, get the first cable car up there and the views are just absolutely amazing. Anyways, I've selected this picture from the contenders where some interesting cloud was drifting in to cling to the peak of the Aiguille. The actual image, untouched, straight out of the camera, looks pretty gutless, a bit flat, but looking at the histogram you can see I've got a good exposure there. It's bunched to the right, there's no clipping of highlights or shadows. So first thing I do is always adjust my black and white points, and I just move the black point to the right there to make sure that the darkest point in the image is a true black. Whites I'm not going to touch because the toe of my histogram, the right toe, is just where it needs to be. I'm just going to put a touch of contrast into the picture using the curves there, something like about that. And I'm going to add some sharpening and put some masking in. Hold down Alt, drag that to the right. I just want the masking to affect the sky really, so round about that looks right. Now the thing is, that picture I've improved it a fair bit from where we started, but essentially what I want is the sky to be darker, have more mood, whilst not getting too light on the foreground, so I need to selectively adjust that. I couldn't use a filter at the time because a grad filter would just go right across the middle of the image, and the composition precluded that. Similarly, the grad filter here in Lightroom is very, very useful, we know that, but again, because of the shape of this peak in the image, what I need is something a bit more selective. So I'm going to use the adjustment brush here, and if I click on that, it comes up with this control here, and let's just go straight down here, and it's talking about the size of the adjustment brush. So first thing we have to decide is, what do I want to do to this picture? And the first thing I want to do is darken down the sky. So the size of the brush will very much be determined by the size of the area that I'm working on. So if I just make that brush bigger, something like about that, that's going to enable me to select that area. You can see we have two controls here. The inner circle is the area that's been affected, and the gap between the inner and the outer circle is the feather radius. There you see, feather 100. So what I want to do is then just move this brush across the area that I want to affect, and it's a relatively crude tool, but there again, what we're trying to do is not really be too precise with our selection. We're actually trying to have a very sort of smooth transition between our area that I'm affecting and not. And now if I take the exposure and I move it like this, what it's doing is adjusting the exposure the darkness of the area of the image that I've just selected. And it's really, as you can see, that's quite flexible, isn't it? And I can also adjust my contrast. I can take contrast out or put it in. I would say something like about that. And you can see that's made a radical difference to the image. I'm just a little bit worried about this area down there. Looks a little bit too. I'm going to come down on my size of selection and just paint in a bit round here. Touch. And I'm getting there. And then when I'm happy that I've done that, I can adjust my highlights and shadows as before. I can we want to stay away from clarity and saturation. You know well my opinion on those two sliders. Basically I'm just adjusting the darkness of the sky on this picture, and I'm pretty happy with that. So when I'm done, I click on done. The next thing I'm looking at is the actual area here is just again a little bit flat. So what I'm going to do is again make a selection, and I'm going to go up to a fairly big brush size, and I'm going to bring it across this area of rock here. Okay, and now I want to actually brighten that, just not much, just a touch, and maybe put a touch of contrast in there. And you can see you can be quite controlled about this. I generally prefer to do this in Photoshop, but if you're committed and want to work solely in Lightroom, then this is quite a handy thing to do. And that's the adjustment brush, and you can do this to as many areas of the image as you like. When I'm done, click on that, and now I would say okay, that pretty much is the image as I want it. So there you go. I'd urge you to experiment, and good luck.